Top stories in our news today. Government, through the Civil Service Commission, has dismissed 12 accountants who were involved in various offences involving public funds. And the Ministry of Finance has clarified that the 450,000 kwacha that went missing was not as a result of a crash of the Integrated Financial Management Information System. And now the news in detail. Government, through the Civil Service Commission, has dismissed 12 accountants who were involved in various offences involving public funds. The dismissed officers are from the Ministry of General Education, the Ministry of Commerce, Trade and Industry, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and the Lusaka Province Administration. Under the Ministry of Education, Chizaso Tole, a senior accountant, Elia Mwale, an accountant, Lazarus Chandam, an assistant accountant, and Ivy Swajane, an account assistant, have been dismissed in accordance with Section 21A(v) of the Disciplinary Code and Procedures for Handling Offences in the Public Service. At the Ministry of Commerce, Moses Tole, an account assistant, is the only person who has been dismissed for similar offences. No Molopam, an assistant director for operations, and Lawrence Piri, an accountant, are the two officers that have been dismissed for similar offences at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. At Lusaka Provincial Administration, 4 officials have been dismissed. Their names are Ms. Grace Zimba, a principal accountant, Sela Bandam, an accountant, Nzewa Chumbum, an accounts assistant, and Gideon Zulu, an accounts assistant. This is according to a statement made available to QTV News by Minister of Finance spokesperson Chileshe Kandeta. We know Mr. Kandeta has clarified that the 450,000 kwacha that was earlier reported missing was not as a result of a crash of the Integrated Financial Management Information System, IFMIS. Mr. Kandeta says that the money was fraudulently paid to an individual for the year ending 31st December. He says that the money was supposed to have been paid to the Zambia Bureau of Standards, ZABS, and the Competition and Consumer Protection Commission, CCPC. Mr. Kandeta says that the fraudulent transaction was traced using the IFMIS audit trail by the Controller of Internal Audit, and that a report on the trail was thereafter shared with Office of the Auditor General. He says that when the matter was brought to the attention of the Ministry of Commerce, under which ZABS and CCPC form, 2 individuals were involved in the transaction were dismissed in December 2017. Mr. Kandeta has named the 2 who were at that time a senior accountant and an account assistant at the ministry as Rogers Mwanza and Lukando Matambo, respectively. He states that the case is now under investigation by law enforcement agencies and that the due process of the law will be followed to latter in reaching a conclusive end on the matter. Government has reaffirmed its commitment to protecting Zambia's cyberspace through formulation of appropriate legislations. Minister of Transport and Communications Brian Mushimba has referred to e-commerce, cyber protection and data protection acts as some of the legislation government is formulating. Mr. Mushimba says government is also committed to increasing equitable access to affordable and quality information and communications technology products and services. He has, however, acknowledged that increased access to ICT calls for investment in specialized skills to provide assurance to stakeholders of all categories that they can safely use ICT. Speaking in a speech read for him by Transport and Communications Permanent Secretary Mishek Lungu at the official opening of the Information Systems Audit and Control Association Isaka Computer Audit Control and Security Conference, Mr. Mushimba also observed that governance and risk management are important components in administration and management of the ICT environment. Mr. Mushimba has since commended Isaka Lusaka chapter for working with Isaka Global in contributing to government's drive towards the enactment of laws on data protection, electronic commerce, and cyber security and cyber crimes.
Zambia, under the leadership of His Excellency, Mr. Edgar Chapalungu, President of the Republic of Zambia has demonstrated excellent leadership by investing massively in ICT infrastructure and skills development through the establishment of the ICT College in Dola and implementation of the Communication Towers Project Phase 1 and 2. In 2015, His Excellency also introduced what we call Center of E-Government, which is now called Smart Zambia Institute, under his office to accelerate ICT penetration in public sector to enable access by the Zambian public. We have the Smart Zambia Institute, which is purely intended to transform public institutions to provide service using the ICT platform. Together, we can. Together, we can make this easy. We need to provide the beautiful ideas to the policymakers to enable our people leverage on the ICT platform.
And speaking at the same event, Isaka Lusaka chapter president Chipo Gusha Majele says his organization is working with youths in information communications technology systems with the aim of educating them on the need to protect cyberspace.
As you all know, the world and Africa is no exception. Currently stands at the brink of a technological revolution known as the digital revolution. It is characterized by a fusion of technologies that is blurring the lines between physical, digital, and biological spheres, and will fundamentally alter the way we live, work, and relate with one another. In its scale, scope, and complexity, this transformation is unlike any other that the world has ever experienced before. And quite frankly, no one knows how it will unfold. But one thing is clear. The response to it must be integrated, comprehensive, involving all stakeholders from the global scale, from public and private sectors to academia and civil society groups. ISACA, through its global advocacy programs, aims to reach out to all these diverse stakeholders, to tap into young minds on the subject of IT assurance, security, governance, risk management. The research standards and certifications, frameworks, and knowledge base that ISACA provides gives opportunities for development.
The 2 days Africa Computer Audit Control and Security International Conference, which closes on Tuesday, is being held under the theme Building Business Resilience in a Digitally Connected World. The Gordon Progressive Party, GOP, has expressed concern that 54 years after independence from colonial rule, Zambian politics are still void of issues. GOP President Jackson Silavwe says his party is also concerned that 54 years after independence, frontline political parties do not even meet eye to eye to discuss issues. Mr. Silavwe states that his party's concern is particularly that his only shows that Zambian politics have not yet matured to represent the nation's age. In an interview with QTV News, Mr. Silavwe says his party is equally concerned by how high levels of unemployment and public debt are and how taxes are being haphazardly introduced by government. He says that the GOP is troubled that 54 years after independence, Zambia has moved from the state that is sensitive to the needs of the people to a state that is more interested in making money. Mr. Silavwe states that as the country reflects on its years of independence this year, the focus should be on how Zambia must be emancipated economically. He says it is within all Zambians' rights to change their country's economic order.
As Gordon Progressive Party, we are making a call to the Zambian people. We are making a clarion call to the Zambian people that it is time to change our economic order. Our economic order is not supporting the Zambian people. We need to come up with an economic order that is going to benefit the Zambian people. transport sector that will benefit the Zambian people. We are grappling with the issue of giving land to foreigners. We saw on ZNBC recently where we saw the president approving, having meetings with investors, talking about 10,000 hectares, 5,000 hectares to foreigners. As a country, we need to have a relook. We need to question ourselves. The freedom that KK, Simon Mansaka Pwepwe, Harry Mangankumbula fought for, was it in vain? Was it in vain that at 54 we can be giving 10,000 hectares to a foreigner and yet a Zambian does not even have a farm where to farm? I would be glad that at 54 the government comes up with a deliberate policy of giving even 1 acre to a Zambian for them to farm and given the incentives thereof. It has gotten
The opposition movement for Multi-Party Democracy MMD faction leader Dr. Nevas Mumba says God has spoken to him of what Zambia will be in the next 40 years. Dr. Mumba says from his vision, if Zambia does not become the most prosperous country in Africa, it will be amongst the topmost prosperous countries. He states that for the fact that Zambia has acknowledged God as its center of activities, all it now needs is a leadership that complements this choice and make every citizen feel part of the country. Speaking during a pre-recorded QTV discussion program, Faith Avenue, Dr. Mumba said the leadership he is referring must be one that inspires productivity and innovation in the country. Dr. Mumba, who is also a pastor, says he therefore foresees the Christian critical mass being an influencer to what he has phrased as a new shape of Zambia. He believes that in the next few years, the church will take its rightful place in Zambia, after which the country's economy will begin to fall into place and the politics of civility will come to the fore.
I think the Christian critical mass in the next few years is going to be a great influencer of the new shape of Zambia. Right now, the church looks weak. It's not deciding who becomes the next president. But I see that in the next few years, the church is going to take its rightful place. And the moment they take that place, then you start to see the economy falling into place. Then you start to see the politics of civility, love, reconciliation, forgiveness and inclusiveness coming. You are going to see these values we only talk about come into place. And that is why I got involved in politics, to bring about such kind of an atmosphere in this country, so that our children can say, at least we have an infrastructure of prosperity, peace, living at peace with one another, where our differences only help us go further, but they don't divide us. Where our tribal differences do not make us fight, but they make us laugh and enjoy our diversity and the types of food the Tongas eat, the types of food the Lozis eat, eating crocodiles, and the Kaundes and the Zambians eating monkeys, as they call them, and these guys eating rats. Instead of fighting, we laugh at those foods. I see that Zambia. I see Zambia saved, and I'm confident that Zambia shall be saved. I think
the Law Association of Zambia Laws has bemoaned the continued poor passing rate of law graduates at the Zambia Institute of Advanced Legal Education, ZIALE. And the Laws has called for an investigation to determine as to why a lot of students fail in civil procedures, a course that only saw 8 students passing. Recently, ZIALE released the results showing that out of 378, only 4 passed the bar exams. But last President Eddie Mwitwa has told Q News in an interview that it was expected that the results for the recent exams would improve to those recorded in April this year, which saw about 312 lawyers admitted to the bar. Mr. Mwitwa, however, is hopeful that whatever led to the low pass rates will be resolved before the current intake seats for the final exams.
The Law Association of Zambia is disappointed with the recent results from the Zambia Institute of Advanced Legal Education, ZIALE. We obviously had hoped that the results would be better than what was announced on Friday, especially that just earlier this year in April, we had 312 lawyers admitted to the bar. Obviously those were repeating, some for the second time, others maybe for the third time. But we have had instances where more than 300 students write exams at ZIALE and you get about 40 or so passing at first attempt. So to get 4 is almost shocking, but it's obviously disappointing. We also hope that the students that will have the courage to sit for the December repeaters exams will do much better than they did at their first attempt, and we're quite hopeful that the numbers will be much more than the 4 that made it on the first attempt. We also hope that the institution itself, the lecturers, various stakeholders and the students themselves will use these results as an opportunity to look at what can be done better at Ziali, both for the sake of the image of the institution, the growth of the legal profession in Zambia, and also on a broader scale, the administration of justice in Zambia, because we do need as many lawyers as possible.
The Socialist Party has described President Edgar Lungu's government as the most corrupt in Zambia's history. Socialist Party Secretary General Cosmas Msumali has expressed a worry that the ruling Patriotic Front, PF, which promised to fight corruption while in the opposition, is now allegedly engulfed in several allegations of corruption. He says that this is evidenced by the number of corruption cases being recorded both in the Financial Intelligence Report and Auditor General's report. Dr. Msumali says it is for this reason he has doubted President Edgar Lungu's commitment to the fight against corruption in the country. He tells QTV News that there is no fight against corruption in Zambia because the government has failed to eradicate corruption.
President Edgar Lungu's commitment towards the fight against corruption, I think, is a sentence that is problematic. We are talking about one of the most corrupt governments in the entire history of Zambia. And the commitment is to corruption. The commitment is not to the fight against corruption. And that's what Zambians ought to know. On the other hand, we don't do justice to the whole fight against corruption if we center it to an individual, if we center it to the head of state. Zambians must know that we live in a highly corrupt society. It's not about a single individual, it's not about the president himself. If President Lungu was not committed, if President Lungu himself is involved in corruption, and the rest of Zambians were not corrupt, if the rest of Zambians were anti-corruption, then the story would be very different. But it just doesn't take a leader. It takes the whole society to fight corruption. So in as much as we talk about the leader, because leaders are there to provide solutions, but we should also look at ourselves as the people of Zambia, because the people also have the right to provide solutions where politicians fail. It's a double-edged sword. There's no fight against corruption in Zambia. It's piecemeal. There's a lot of scapegoating. It's a disaster.
People's Alliance for Change PAC President Anford Banda has observed that Zambia is currently facing a situation of policy incoherence and misplaced priorities. Mr. Banda says that this is evidenced on how government has managed the 2017-2018 farming season, saying there is no way government can explain the failure by the Food Reserve Agency, FRA, to purchase at least even 50% of what was budgeted for. He has told QTV News that this is, however, a worrying situation when it comes to food security. Mr. Banda has since predicted that there will be an increase in the number of people who will be food insecure, given how government, through the Food Reserve Agency, have managed the 2017-2018 marketing season. He states that this is also an indication that government is made a mess of the horse. In a mess, and should accept that they have failed to run the affairs of this country.
Then the Minister of Finance herself knew that FRA were far behind target, meeting the 2018, target for purchase of maize, and yet she went ahead and put in the budget another 500,000 metric tons of maize to be purchased next year. How are they going to achieve that if they have failed to achieve even half of that? And it's clear, the government is in a mess. The government is in problems, and they don't want to accept it. And what's worrying is that even when they are, failing to just, even just acquire, maize, they're still going, to spend money on things that are necessary, such as the jets. They bought, vehicles for DCs just a few weeks ago. They bought vehicles for themselves, for the ministers. Just a few months ago. So we can, and then also, if you talk about scandals and misappropriation of funds, it's getting worse by the day. Just a few weeks ago, we told about how money got lost in the social cash transfer funds, and yet they are failing to just prioritize the issue of ensuring that the country's food situation is secured. How do you explain failing to purchase even half of what was budgeted for this year, and then they go ahead and actually put the same amount next year? So for me, my call, on behalf of the party PAC, our call to the people of Zambia is that you need to ensure that your voices become louder, because this government doesn't care about you, your children, and the future of this country. Then
the ruling Patriotic Front, PF, has justified why it finds it competent to comment on every issue that touches on government policy. PF Media Director Sande Chanda says that those that feel that the party should not comment on every issue of government policy should realize that government is birthed by the party. Mr. Chanda says that the ruling PF owes the 2016 to 2021 party manifesto, which government is currently implementing. In an interview with QTV News, Mr. Chanda says that the ruling PF therefore remains very competent to comment on all issues that are captured in its manifesto. Mr. Chanda says that this is especially that his party also tracks implementation of the party manifesto with the view of understanding how policies and election campaigns promises are being fulfilled. He says that this means that when an issue such as a rise in the price of palm fuel brings about a debate in the country, the ruling PF has a duty to render its position. Mr. Chanda says that the ruling PF does not in this case only exist for the purpose of politicking, but also for robust engagement with the government on policy implementation. He states that all those who have issues with the ruling party commenting on issues of government policy cannot ever be excused.
The party remains very competent to comment on all issues that are captured in its manifesto. Because as a party, we also do tracking of implementation to understand how policies and how election promises are being fulfilled. We are a stakeholder in that regard, and we are very interested. And when there's an issue such as fuel increment, etc., these are issues under the energy sector in the party manifesto that we have talked about. And we have a duty to explain to the people of Zambia. We have a duty to render our position as a party. And so those who have issues with the party commenting on matters of policy can be excused, and there's very little that a party can do, because the party does not just exist for purposes of politicking.
Still in our local news, a human rights lawyer, Mono Mapani, has observed that Zambia currently falls short of all ingredients that define a democratic state. Mr. Mapani does not think Zambia should be referred to be a democratic state when respect for the rule of law and human rights does not exist. He has wondered how Zambia can be a democratic state when government allegedly lacks transparency and accountability in running affairs of the state. In a walk-in interview with QTV News, Mr. Mapani states that had Zambia been a democratic state, content of its supreme law could have by now represented the aspiration of the people. Mr. Mapani thinks that Zambia is therefore proof that while a country can be a constitutional state on paper, it does not necessarily mean that such a country is also democratic. He says as far as he is concerned, Zambia is by far from being what a democratic state is.
We cannot claim that we're a democratic state. Far from it. People say Zambia is a constitutional country. Yes, indeed it is. But it's not every constitutional country or the country that is governed by the constitution is a democratic state. Not at all. Because one among others, the contents in the constitution, some of them are not people demands. Meaning they are not people driven elements or clauses. Secondly, we call ourselves a democratic state, and today we are saying no, because we have failed to respect the importance of democracy and its tenets. One among others, we have failed to respect the rule of law. We have failed to respect the human rights. There is no transparency in the manner the governors are running our state. There is no accountability in this country. Decentralization has failed. There is no respect of rule of law. Putting these things together, it will be very difficult for any reasonable person to claim that Zambia is a democratic state.
A total of 476 persons were killed in road traffic accidents recorded in the third quarter of 2018. The Zambia police recorded a total of 7,915 road traffic accidents, out of which 394 were fatal. Police spokesperson Esther Katongo says of the recorded road traffic accidents, Lusaka province had the highest number of 4,220 road traffic accidents. In a statement to Q News, Ms. Katongo says Lusaka province was followed by Copperbelt province, which had 1,120 road traffic accidents. Ms. Katongo says Northern Province and Airports Division were the least with 131 and 34 road traffic accidents respectively.
176 persons were killed, 790 were serious injury road traffic accidents, in which 1,443 persons were seriously injured, 1,517 were slight injury road traffic accidents, in which 2,170 persons were slightly injured, while 5,214 were damages only road traffic accidents. Despite recording an increase in the number of fatal road traffic accidents, there was a decrease in the number of persons killed by 21.
And the Department of Immigration has this month arrested 71 people countrywide for various immigration offenses. Public Relations Officer Namati Nshinka says 54 people were apprehended in a cleanup operation conducted in Lusaka on October 20th, 2018. Mr. Nshinka states that the operation covered selected parts of Lusaka, including Mtendere, Hybrid Area, Chawama, Garden, Misisi, and Kabwata townships. He notes that those nabbed during the operation were 19 Burundians, 9 Congolese, 8 Zimbabweans, and 4 Chinese. Mr. Nshinka says 54 arrested are currently in detention pending further screening and possible prosecution. He further notes that in Chelenge, 2 Congolese and 1 Ugandan were also arrested, while in Dola and Choma, 2 other Congolese were separately for unlawful entry. In a statement made available to Zanis in Lusaka today, Mr. Nshinka notes that 3 other Congolese refugees were arrested for being outside the camp. Mr. Nshinka has further disclosed that 2 Eritreans, 1 Briton, and a Zambian were also arrested in the suspected case of human trafficking in Lusaka. As we end the news, a recap of stories making headlines once again. Government, through the Civil Service Commission, has dismissed 12 accountants who were involved in various offences involving public funds. And the Ministry of Finance has clarified that the 450,000 kwacha that went missing was not as a result of a crash of the Integrated Financial Management Information System. Thank you so much for your time. On behalf of everybody involved in the production of this news, bye-bye and God bless.